What is up, guys? It's your boy, still somehow sick Cactus, so I apologize for the voice one more time, but today we have some absolutely shocking new information coming out of the Bungie situation. Now, what the heck is the Bungie situation? For those of you who may be unaware, well, earlier in the week, it was reported that a wave of layoffs was hitting Bungie. We found out about this mainly firsthand from the employees themselves. It came as quite the shock. Now, this information was followed by additional information claiming that the next big expansion, the Final Shape, would be delayed from February all the way until June 2024. This has yet to be confirmed, but it's looking very likely. And then right after that, information on the why all this was happening came out, with Destiny 2 down 45% in terms of earnings based on projections. So that's where we are right now, and let's get into the new stuff. Now, this new stuff is coming from Paul Tassi over at Forbes, and he is getting this information, as you can see right here, from insider knowledge, saying specifically, after a lengthy conversation with someone with inside knowledge of the situation, there's new info about how the layoffs happened, staff reaction since then, and the state of Destiny 2 and the Final Shape. Now, this is very interesting because Paul was actually one of the first people to bring us some inside information, reporting, I think the day all this was happening, about the fact that, this was done on the 30th of October, so that people only had one day to claim benefits, that, for example, promised stock options in Sony and Bungie would revert back to Bungie even if you're laid off and stuff like that. And that has been corroborated by other journalists as well. So this is some very interesting information. And clearly, Paul's got a source on the inside. So let's get started here with the points about the layoffs. Point number 1, management said other levers were looked at to avoid layoffs. When employees asked if one lever was executive compensation, they were told no, and that it would not happen at the company. Now, this has since been corrected, as you can see Paul saying that apparently there was potentially some pay cuts going on with upper management, but the actual amount was never disclosed. Now, moving on from there, the second point. Internally, really no one is blaming Sony for this, even management. In fact, some of the employees were told that if the Sony buyout did not happen, that with the current Destiny 2 performance, the studio itself would have been in jeopardy if they were still independent. That is absolutely crazy because, this 45% decline based on projections is on the heels of massive growth. The year previous to Lightfall, which was a disappointment, was the Witch Queen, which was a colossal success. Like, you have a full year after the Witch Queen of everyone extremely hyped, and Lightfall rode that hype to massive sales numbers. Like, Lightfall was critically panned, but it sold extremely well. So spending has really only been down from the seasons after Lightfall, and the studio is at risk of imploding? Like, what is going on over there? Now, the next main point. Cannot be fully confirmed among every employee, but at least to some, Destiny 2 director Joe Blackburn is not really considered to be one of the corporate culprits here for how things went down. Honestly, that is good to hear. Like, you don't want people working on Destiny 2, blaming the guy in charge of Destiny 2. It sounds like it was, even above Joe Blackburn's pay grade. Now, moving on from there, the next point. The expensive new building was a separate project that likely would not have saved jobs given the context of when that was drafted and when work started. Similarly, the $1.2 billion in employee retention from Sony was spent long ago, often on buying out employees' Bungie shares, which then went to Sony. There's nothing left in that pot to avoid layoffs, which wasn't what it was meant for this late in transition. Very interesting. So they spent that money on employee retention almost immediately. Now, moving on from there, a couple more points. The trend line of spending on the game over time made the current year's revenue estimates somewhat logical. So yes, the 45% miss is important and was not necessarily some wildly inflated projection, however nearsighted it ended up being. There has been a real damaging drop post-Lightfall in terms of player engagement and spending, and Lightfall sold very well, which is what I talked about earlier. Now this point does somewhat contradict my personal opinion. I do think they inflated the spending projections slightly to secure the bag from Sony. Sony bought them in summer 2022. The next big expansion up was Lightfall, so it makes all the sense in the world that they made those projections look very good. Now, obviously, I don't think it was a massive overinflation, but, if it could go one of two ways, I feel like they were erring on the side of Lightfall would do very well. And remember, I did tweet that opinion, and one of the Bungie employees laid off liked my tweet, so that it's just a little bit anecdotal. Your boy's got his inside sources as well, I guess. Now, moving on from there, guys, next point. Employees are extremely angry with leadership now, and have often communicated that publicly in meetings. Bets were made that did not pay off, but those who made them remain in the company, a fact lost on no one. And that is a big deal, right? Like, the reasons behind why Lightfall was so panned, the people making those decisions, right, they were not let go, and people on the social teams, for example, were let go. They had nothing to do with the fact that Lightfall was a disappointment and the seasons that followed, right? So that is an important factor. Now, moving on from there, the next section is on the final shape, the next big expansion. So, first point, the final shape delay was known by some a couple of months ago, but it is happening late enough where there cannot be a 30th anniversary size drop to split the season, as that took around 8 months to build. There will be something in the season 23 gap, but no specifics. So again, very important. That means that it won't just be season 23, the next season, which launches on November, I think 28th, and then nothing until the final shape. There's going to be something likely coming around that February launch date where final shape was targeted for, but it's going to be not as substantial as the 30th anniversary. Now, if you can remember, the 30th anniversary, it came with, the new dungeon, Galahorn, as well as the Forerunner and a bunch of other weapons and stuff around it. So less than that, I'm thinking no dungeon, probably, likely a drop of weapons, maybe an exotic quest, but that's going to be about it. Now, something is better than nothing, but still, that's not great. Moving on from there, the next point. They want the final shape not just to be as good as Forsaken or the Taken King, but better. Hence the good not great feedback that will be polished during a delay. It needs to be the best, and it's viewed as the key to turning things around. So they're banking hard on the final shape. It does somewhat make sense. The final shape is the end of the Light versus Darkness saga. It is the finale, so it better be fantastic. And at least it's good to hear that Bungie views it in that way, that it has to be like one of the best DLCs of all time. Now, moving on from there, next point. The Final Shape campaign and features are reportedly quite solid even in its current state, ahead of planned future work, but they want to go even further, and there is some concern about crunch to make that happen even with a delay. Moving on from there, the next segment is Destiny overall, and the first point is frankly shocking. Part of the new PvP strike team was impacted by layoffs, but significant progress has been made on the map pack already, and it should not be cancelled. Let's just talk about this for a second. This makes absolutely no sense. When viewing the layoffs from a purely business perspective, I'm not saying I condone any of this, but if I'm looking at it, I put myself in Pete Parsons' chair, right? And I'm saying, I need to save some money. There needs to be layoff, right? I can somewhat understand the logic behind going, all right, let's cut the socials team. We don't need to be tweeting 3 times a day. Let's cut that back, right? Now, the results, and not having community managers is going to be devastating. I don't think it was thought of, but that's a whole nother point. I can understand the logic. But why would you fire people in the PvP strike team? These are people specifically given a job to turn things around. The PvP strike team was just announced a few months ago as a group of people who are there to really go after a lot of the glaring problems within the Crucible that the community has been upset about for years now. How could layoffs impact those people? Those people are directly responsible for helping to get Destiny 2 back on track. So how in the world would layoffs impact them? That is extremely concerning. Now, moving on from there, guys, next point. No significant changes have been announced to staff for the longer-term future of Destiny 2 plans because of these layoffs and the delay yet. No known plans to reduce support for Destiny 2 below old, already planned levels. No new info about long-term or something like Destiny 3, which I did not get the sense was really on the radar. Okay, so it looks like they're batting down the hatches all for Final Shape, and they're still planning to do the episodes that come after, but, we're not going to have, things cut and expectations going down, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now for Destiny 2 support. Moving on from there. In-game LFG has been tremendously difficult from a tech perspective and reportedly was announced to the community before the devs themselves. It is far more complicated than players will understand, even if it seems it's an obvious thing the game should have. It'll launch, but it's been a tough road. Now that is supposed to come, I do believe, next season, season 23. Perhaps it'll get delayed until the Final Shape, but that is something where it is going to be huge for the game to have a built-in LFG. Is just going to make things so much easier. But yeah, like the fact that, hey, we're going to announce this extra thing and shove it into a season, and it turns out to be a massive amount of work, that's work that isn't going to new content necessarily. So yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Moving on from there. There have been many meetings about microtransactions where many devs wanted to reduce them, but they were always given the reply that they are necessary given how expensive Destiny is to operate, and complaints about new ones don't always reflect reality. Event cards may seem lame, but they sell well, for instance. Or you'll be surprised how many people are still buying the oldest expansions that we always say should be free by now. Now, I completely expect that, right, from Bungie corporate, from Bungie management to be saying that. Like, guys, how many people are still buying the Forsaken weapon pack? Probably more than you think. But how many people, this is the thing that is never considered by these management types. They look at the wrong numbers and they never consider the alternative. How many people are turned away from starting their Destiny 2 journey because they look at the absurdity of the DLC front, like of the Steam store? Like if you go to Steam, you add up all the DLC, it's like $500. People see that and they're instantly turned off onto starting Destiny 2. So yeah, I'm sure you're making some shekels from event cards and from the old Forsaken weapon pack, but I would bet my house that the amount of new players entering the game would be significantly more if you made a lot of that stuff free, or if you just had a really discounted pack where it was all, the old stuff after 2 years ago. Everything after 2 years ago was $20 and that's it, or something like that. I think that would go a long way, and in the long term, by introducing so many new players to Destiny, you're going to make up that revenue, like in the long term. If no new players are ever entering the game, all you have is a dwindling player base. Like all you have is revenue going down, Bungie. You're never going to improve revenue because you're never going to attract any new players. In any event, moving on from there, the next point is the ultimate goal is very much for Bungie to be a multi-IP studio with multiple games and revenue streams. But even if Marathon is a success, they are likely not plans for some huge mass migration from the Destiny team to the Marathon team, abandoning the franchise. So, At the end of the day, even though things are not looking good right now, Destiny is here to stay. It is such a powerful IP, right? They're still pumping out Call of Duties every year, right? Destiny is one of the most recognized IPs in the world. I really don't think they're just going to abandon it like some people think. They're just going to let it die. Even if Bungie let it die, like Sony would take it and give it to another studio, or someone would come and buy the IP because it's so recognized, right? Like, it's not going anywhere, frankly. But moving on from there, guys, we have the final statement right here, the final thoughts about the situation from Paul. So I'm going to read it here. Again, this all seems very self-contained within Bungie, and at least in this conversation, Sony and its own goals/live service plans rarely came up at all, though I don't know what's happening at the highest levels at this point. The general mood of most of the remaining at Bungie is one of anger, sadness, and fear. Anger over how the layoffs were handled, sadness over those who departed, fear that there may be more layoffs to come, and essentially no one feels safe. However, there is a lot of faith that there is some genuinely cool stuff coming in the final shape that hopefully players will love. Everything seems to point towards the final shape being a make or break moment for Destiny, but yes, it really may be that this time. I didn't hear anything about what may be past the episodes, which will still make it out, but the player base and revenue has to recover, and new IPs like Marathon will have to deliver. It's an extraordinarily rough time for those who lost their jobs clearly, but also for those who remain. Some in the studio believe players actively want them to fail at times with all the negativity, but I don't believe that's true. If the game delivers, it will recover, but the current situation is going to make the road ahead extremely difficult if the goal is to reverse player retention and spending losses. To me, it feels like pinning everything on the final shape is too many eggs in one basket, but we'll see. I have reached out to Bungie for comment, and I'll update you if I hear back. Wow. So, some pretty crazy stuff, and kind of we went over all those points, and man, at the end of the day, yeah, it's hard being a Destiny fan out there. I'm sure a lot of you guys would agree. All I want to do is play the game I fell in love with, and play the game that I know can be good. This is the crazy thing. Witch Queen was like not that long ago, right? Like before the Witch Queen, we were all kind of pointing to Forsaken as being the best time ever for Destiny 2, at least in my opinion and a lot of other people's opinions. But that was made with the help of Activision. So there was a big question mark on whether or not Bungie could actually achieve that success on their own. But the Witch Queen, most people loved the Witch Queen, and the Witch Queen is pointed at as a very, very good expansion, and the seasons that followed, right? And that was done by Bungie on their lonesome. We know they have the capability. We know they can put out very, very good content. And so I think that's part of the negativity. It's like we've seen them do so good that people get negative whenever they miss that mark. Like we're accustomed to a quality, and so when we get lower quality, we obviously notice. Hopefully, Bungie can get things back on track. I really, really hope the final shape is just as much of a banger as Bungie wants it to be, because like I've said before, we know they're capable of absolute bangers. We know that when Destiny 2 is good, nothing beats it. Nothing comes close. When there's so much to do, there's so much going on. Every day you log in, you're discovering new content, stuff like that. Nothing will beat that. And hopefully we can feel that one more time at least. Guys, that is it for the video. Hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.